Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So I see in the UK it's 2 o'clock, so we will make a slow start. Today's event is recorded so that we have a record of all the great work that was going on, and a warm welcome from me. My name is Katharina De Vita, and I'm hosting today's event. And we are looking at innovation in the classroom, so a showcase of innovative teaching. And it is my great pleasure to have three fantastic speakers here, Tony, Caroline, and Stephen. Before we hand over to our speakers, I just wanted to say words about the event. Initially, a quick overview of the Teaching and Coaching Innovation Special Interest Group. And I give the floor to John. Who could better introduce the SIG than John?
Lovely. Thanks, Katerina, and hello, everyone, and welcome. Think of me as that little annoying advert you get on YouTube videos before the real thing happens. But let me just make a plug. If you found your way to this and you're not yet a member, please think about joining us. It's completely free. You can sign up for ISPIM, which is a great networking organization, bringing, for me, a great mixture of practitioners, consultants, researchers, academics. It's a great mixing pot. But within that, there are special interest groups, and ours is about teaching and coaching, and not just in classrooms, in all sorts of different contexts. How do we get the message across? Because we all believe these skills are important. They're going to be more so, and we need to learn how to do it. So we've tried as a team to create interesting workshops and things, and today's is very much a great example. So please, if you're interested and this is your first time, do join us. I'll put in the chat Lucia's email address if you want to drop someone a line, but also Katerina or myself or anyone would forward you as well. But it's a great group, and it does wonderful things like the workshop you're about to experience. And I won't take up any more time. Katerina, back to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. So you find us on social media. We have a newsletter. Make sure you sign up so you keep up to date what is happening, and do join us in this conversation. It's a community of practice, means we want you all to participate and join in. Okay, without further ado, let me say a few words about today's event and where this idea is coming from. So I think when we engage with teaching, we often do that in the context of our own institution. We have maybe members of the team that are familiar with our teaching, but often it doesn't go much further. But we know how important it is to think about innovative teaching and engaging our students. So we want to provide a platform where we really promote innovative teaching and have people share and demonstrate some of the great teaching practices. So it's really about thinking what works, what is effective, and disseminating those effective practices more widely. And we want to do that in a very concise session with short teaching showcases that are actionable for you also to adopt in your own institutional context. And we encourage the reflection alongside the teaching showcase. The format is very simple. We will hear from each of the speakers essentially three things: a little bit about the context in which they're teaching, a bit about the institution, the size of the module, the size of the cohort, and to understand really what is the context in which this teaching takes place. And then the meaty part is the approach and the resources. So here we have our speakers reflect on the teaching practice, the concrete example that we hear about, what is innovative and what are the resources that are needed to deliver this particular session. And ultimately, we also want to know what makes this teaching practice effective. Is it particular student feedback, feedback from colleagues, the engagement or attendance or grades of students? And we will hear that from our speakers in more detail. So we give 15 minutes to each presentation, and we will start with Tony, who's going to talk about engaging industry in innovation teaching. We then hear from Caroline, who will be talking about cognitive mapping. And finally, Steve will share with us innovative pedagogy for contextualizing innovation management, which then is followed by a panel where you can ask your questions directly to our three speakers. So without further ado, I would like to hand over the screen to Tony. Tony, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I should just share my slides. Hopefully you can all see them okay. So thank you, Catherine. A great introduction. And it is a great community. So I'm really pleased. I'm really pleased to be here. So my name is Tony Morgan. I'm an associate professor in innovation management practice at the University of Leeds. The practice word comes because my experience is very much in industry. I spent about 30 years in IT and technology, 20 years for IBM, including senior innovation roles. And then despite the grey hair, made quite a late career change. So I now work in academia. And I'm going to talk really about how we can engage industry in our innovation teaching, talking about some of the experiences we've got at Leeds. So I'm going to talk about a few modules and I'll sort of talk about them collectively. But going back to what Catherine was saying about some of the logistics, we have a final year undergraduate module, very interdisciplinary, so part business school, part computing, part elsewhere in the university. Currently, 140 students in 2 classes, although we've got ambitious plans to scale up to about 300 students. And we've got a postgraduate master's class as well with about 70 students. So as an introduction, employers, I certainly believe employers want more from graduates than just a very good core degree. They want wider skills. So our focus in our modules is to really help our students develop innovation and wider employability skills, and do that by working in interdisciplinary teams on real-world industry challenges. And a key design element of our teaching is sort of a very deep and broad engagement with industry throughout the modules. So just in terms of the way the modules work, there's some slight differences between the 2 modules, but it's quite similar. They all work on a project basis, and we've created an innovation challenge with a partner, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But then the students, through a series of activities and out of class working in their teams, they research the problem area. As part of this, we give them access to interview an industry expert as part of the research, which is a really great experience for students, because I don't think many students have experience of interviewing people, senior people in industry. So that's a really good skill to develop. They then spend some time using things like design thinking techniques to understand stakeholders and particularly end users, generate diverse ideas, create prototypes and business value. But a key aspect of our main undergraduate project is the iteration piece. So halfway through the module, we say to the students, doing really well, but actually we had the same email from all your project sponsors last night. It said that, please, can you change your idea? We have 70 students in the classroom, all staring, very unhappy. What do you mean? We've been working on this for 4 weeks. We love our solution. And the feedback is innovation is iterative. This happens in the real world, and you need to fall in love with the problem, not the solution. But also we have somebody from industry there that session, and I turn to them and I say, is this real? And that person then talks about their real world experiences of this sort of change happening to them. So the students can see we're not doing this for no reason. We're doing it because stuff happens, and it's really good to experience and build resilience from that in a nice, friendly environment. They go through a second iteration of their project, and in the final session, they pitch their ideas in a competitive environment to an expert panel, including many senior people from industry. I'll talk a bit more about that in a few minutes, but that's a great experience for the students as well to pitch to these people. So if you think of the Dragon's Den or Shark Tank TV program, quite similar to that. So that's our innovation project approach. In terms of the skills development, it's quite matrixed. Some activities happen every week. Other activities happen in specific workshops. So some of the ongoing activities, things like innovation management, we're taking the project through an innovation life cycle. A very iterative one. Creativity and problem solving, some of the innovation techniques we use at various times, things like design thinking, but other techniques. Teamwork and collaboration runs right through the module. absolutely central, as does communication skills, although sometimes we'll have more focus on communication, for example, pitching skills. And then there's certain aspects that run very vertical in certain weeks: commercial awareness, focusing on building business cases, value proposition statements, innovation ecosystems, and things like resilience and change management. As I mentioned, we do this surprise to the students, which is, tends to be very powerful. We have a whole range of doing ways to do industry engagement. I will talk about each of these in a moment. Even though I wasn't covering it, I couldn't resist myself by putting this graphic here. This year we engaged with a company called Nifty Fox, who, I don't know if you've seen sketching live in events, but they sketched one of our pitching events. And what you can see here is the first 5 teams. This is a summary of their pitch in a picture, which the students absolutely loved. But this was being done live. It's a great experience. So that's a little bit of an aside, but if anybody's interested in that, let me know afterwards and I can tell you a bit more about it. But let's have a look at each of these areas of industry engagement. The first one, and I think one of the most powerful ones, is workshop participation. So typically we'll have a 2-hour workshop where there'll be a series of 2 or 3 facilitated activities, and students will be working in their teams. And you can see me, the backdrop I've got behind is a graphic of the collaborative teaching room that we use. So there's tables like the ones you can see here, each have a screen, students working at their own table. And we bring a diverse set of industry experts into the different sessions. They attend the 2-hour workshops, and we task them with spending about 10 minutes with each team. And they ask questions. So what project are you working on? They probe a little bit about what the students are doing. They give advice, they answer questions. And it's a really great way of the students, in a very friendly, natural environment, meeting a lot of people, but getting fantastic industry expertise and advice. So this is not the traditional somebody come along and give a guest lecture for an hour. This is you're interacting with these people who are sitting next to you. We do often give, depending on the session, but the industry experts a few key messages that we'd like them to reinforce, but they're really licensed to roam free and say what they want to say. And so it's quite interesting, but we do give a message to the students as well before we bring the experts in to say, you're going to meet a diverse range of industry experts. They might have different opinions. You might get some advice next week and maybe even some contradictory advice the week after. And that's because if you worked in an organization and you spoke to 5 executives, they would each have their own agenda, their own background, their own experience, and they'd give you their own thoughts and views. They're not always going to be consistent. So part of the skill of meeting people, engaging people, is actually filtering what advice works best for you. So don't change this way and that way, but take that advice on board and see how you can best use it. So I think that's quite an interesting approach for our students, and they really value having the experts in the classroom with them. The next thing we do sort of came from COVID. And this was because suddenly we were teaching a team-based activity where students sat around a table together doing flip charts and post-it notes and activities. And we'd have the industry expert talking to them, but now they were all online. And so we'd use breakout rooms and a fantastic digital tool called Mural instead of the flip charts and post-its. But we lost that industry expertise. So what we decided to do was we created a set of short selfie-style videos with industry experts. We got Mark Dahlia, my design thinking hero, Doug Dietz on the bottom, for example. And we asked them to create either as a short interview or a short selfie-style video where they talk for about 5 minutes about a key skill area: resilience, empathy, communication skills. And so they focus on their experience. They tell a few stories about, to make this real, and offer practical advice. So how could students gain these skills while they're at university? And we've embedded these into our learning platform. And the student feedback is really positive. They love the format. So these short style videos, lots of students engage really well with that format. They love the content. And often in their reflective essays and reflective journals, the students are talking very passionately about the insights they've gained from these. So when we came back in the classroom after COVID, we kept this library of selfie videos. We brought the people back into the classroom, but we kept this library and we're growing it of selfie videos. Other modules use them as well. They've gone really well, and they're a great way of just getting these little sound bites. And the way we've retained them now, these are part of the students' reading list. So as well as reading John's book, for example, which is one of our references, my own book on design thinking, which is one of our references for reading list, they've got access to these videos. So they can use a whole series of different resources. One of the major things we do, each year I mentioned these innovation challenges, we partner with different companies each year. These can be local, national or international organizations, small, medium, large, public sector, private sector, charities. So we try to have a range of different each year. And we co-design the innovation challenge with an expert from one of these organizations. Then, as I've mentioned, during the project, that expert will be interviewed by the students, although we do anonymize the project. So if somebody worked for, let's say, First Direct Bank, we might call it Second Bank or something like that. I think we call it the Fast Bank because there was a second bank somewhere. But that means the students and the university retained the IP if they came up with something fantastic. Also, those experts then respond to emails and so on, questions during the module. Finally, they're amongst the dragons in the den. So you can see this is one of our Dragons Den sessions where the students are pitching to our experts. The expert who's raised the challenge gets the first question. Optionally, they can follow up on the ideas as well. And sometimes this will just be a conversation, but we've had students be invited to the boardroom of a large company to pitch their idea to the board. We've had another team of students invited to London Fashion Week to talk about how they saw AI and digital being used in the fashion industry. So there's lots of potential follow-ups that can happen. But the main thing we ask our industry experts we're partnering with, help us create the challenge, be interviewed by the students, and be part of the panel that pitch to. So it's relatively lightweight, although some of them like to get more involved. And we tend to have some people that do it every year and other people come in and out. So we have that variety. And that's a great way for the organizations to get involved. But it's a great way for the students to learn innovation, working on real challenges with real people from industry. And then, as I mentioned, this Dragon's Den style pitch we do at the end, we have the industry experts we developed the challenge with. We have a wider range of people from industry as part of that as well. So, for example, we might have somebody from the Royal Academy of Engineering or a large company that the university is partnering with that didn't have a challenge that year. And you can just see a few graphics from the most recent session. The students love pitching. That communication piece is really important. But one of the things we tell them is you can have the best idea and the best innovation in the world, but if you can't communicate that idea and communicate the value of it, it will go nowhere. So that pitching part of the innovation piece is really important. And the industry experts vote for the best pitches, and there's some prizes. So you can see a happy team of students at the bottom as well. I know I'm cracking through this at a pace because we want to cover three really good presentations today and then have time for questions at the end. So I won't go through all our positive students' feedback. Students love it. I'll just mention this one top right. The industry guests give us feedback as if we're a real innovation team working for a real company. So that sort of interaction is so important. The students love it, but we encourage them to act professionally, and they love that they're treated professionally like they are a real innovation team. In terms of the impacts, I've mentioned student feedback. Student feedback, we have a formal evaluation survey, very high scores. Student demand, the modules are always full, and that's why we're scaling up over the next couple of years to take more and more students. Key thing for me, the module outcomes are about student employability. And so we get lots of students telling us about how they've told stories about their commercial awareness or how they overcome a problem with their team. And we encourage them to surface these stories. They tell them in job interviews and they come back and tell us how that helped them get the job, which is great. We have alumni feedback. So we have a thriving alumni LinkedIn group, for example. We have lots of alumni come back and say, can you give a talk to our graduate program that I've just joined? So I did one for NHS Digital and one for another company and so on. And we had one alumnus last week who'd sent me an email saying, would you mind having a look at this post I've written? And it was all about empathy, things that she'd learned on the module. And it was great. And I said, I don't need to do any updates for this. This is fantastic. Publish it. It is. She said some very nice words about the module as well, which is great. We've won various internal and external awards and so on. We're also now doing pedagogical research based upon the module, particularly about interdisciplinary and team-based learning and some of the other things we found out. And the other thing I just wanted to talk about a bit more detail before I finish was partner feedback. So the people from industry. Again, these are just a series of quotes. We have many more on this. I'm not going to go through them all. I'll pick the one bottom right this time from Gary at IBM. The module uses techniques and approaches that are absolutely key to the way we innovate with our clients. It's a fantastic way for students to understand how innovation works in the real world. And I think a large part of that is actually that we're so close with industry and we've got so much industry input into this. So the example, the students can interview real people in industry. They're pitching to the real people. They're meeting people from industry every week in a very different environment from a guest lecture. So some closing advice, and I've rattled through this very quickly, I realize, so we are going to get some great time for questions. I can see there's a few things in the chat. I'm not sure if they're questions, but I'll have a look in a moment. I'll just finish off. My advice is use the approaches which work best for your teaching and your students. So because I'm doing a lot of team-based activity, the sort of things that I'm talking about work really well. I think that skills videos, I think is a fantastic way of doing it. I think that would work for most people. That's great. I think one of the questions I often get is, where do you find these contacts to get such a great range of people? And I've got the advantage of having worked in industry for a long time, so I have some of those personally. But I would say use your institution's networks and partnerships as well. So at the University of Leeds, we have an innovation centre called Nexus, which partners with a lot of small organisations, startups. So we always have some of their partners. We have an organisation called the Future Fashion Factory, which is all around textiles and the manufacturing industry. We tend to have a few of their partners, as well as wider ones from the teaching team's own networks and the networks of our contacts in the university. So use your institution's wider networks to help you find contacts. The next one, I think quite a lot of my new colleagues, I've been at the university for 4 or 5 years now, so it's not that new, but I think some of my academic colleagues were sometimes missing out on. They'd be going to industry and saying, oh, we'd like to do this and we'd like to do that, we'd like to do that. But they weren't really highlighting the benefits that the industry partners were going to have. So, key message, when engaging industry, really highlight the benefits to your industry partners, because that will help buy them in. And some of those are from the wider organization, but a lot of them personally for the people that are involved. The partners we work with absolutely love it, meeting these unconstrained minds, the unconstrained thinking. Other people, they're trying to get access to these great people that work at a top university, thinking of recruitment and so on. But think about what benefits you can give those partners as well, and that will really help you to engage them. And my last point here was just do it. Do involve industry, particularly when we're talking about topics like innovation, and innovation management. Then often we're giving case studies or examples about industry. What better way to do that than with the real industry people themselves? And the students really get the benefit of that direct input from industry. So I'm not going to go through this now, because I'm sure we'll be passing the slides around later on. We've got a little story from each of the last 4 or 5 years, including what we did in COVID. And so it says the Dragon's Den goes virtual here at the bottom. But some different stories, and each of them have got a different angle of how we've brought industry and brought the real world into it. So we're covering questions and discussion at the end. I think I've given us a bit of time back because I've rattled through very quickly. Do connect with me on LinkedIn. I love having a discussion and following up. I'm just going to have a look at the chat before I stop sharing to see if there was anything I can pick up. Oh, great. So I can see there's questions from Andrew. What we'll do, Andrew, I'll read these while the other discussions are going on. And then if there are other questions people have got as well, please do post them in the chat. And Katharina, I think we'll cover the questions at the end, won't we?
Yes, thank you so much, first of all. That was an excellent presentation, and I think really shows the enthusiasm that you bring into that unit, and also the great connections and value of industry partners involved. I can see we have questions, but we indeed picked them up as part of our panel. But that was a very great start to what will, I'm sure, follow as another presentation that is really excellent. And I hand over right now to Caroline. Caroline, are you able to share your slides? Okay, great. We can see them now. So you're just muted, but we can see your screen. Do you see the mute button on the very bottom? If you just click on unmute. Caroline, do you want to unmute yourself maybe first and then, yeah.
Thank you. That's what I needed to do. So there was no other way when I was back out there. So I had to come back into the room. Sorry, folks, getting there. Super. There we go. I hope you can hear me because I cannot see your pictures and I'm not going to figure out how to do that right now. So if Katharina, if you can let me know that you can hear me, that would be cool.
All good. The floor.
Excellent. Super. Thanks, guys. Okay, hi. Great. That was a great presentation. Really interesting and great start to the afternoon. My name is Caroline Evers, and I'm a lecturer in marketing practice at Manchester Metropolitan University. I'm going to refer to one particular program that I work on, but I will obviously refer to some other units that I also work with. So I work with level 6 undergraduate students on a consultancy unit. So we bring in external clients, and our students get to work as apprentices or as consultants for these clients, and we work our way through all the challenges that they have there. We also work with, I work with degree apprenticeship students. So those are post-career students on a professional management degree. And I work with them on sales and marketing unit, but also supervising on a synoptic business project where they are, which offers them that opportunity to communicate their learnings from across the degree program. And that's where I'm going to focus my talk a lot around today. So I'm looking at that group of final year degree apprenticeship students who are working on their final synoptic business project and trying to communicate all of the learning that they've gathered across the program that went the couple of years they spend with us. So when we talk about innovation in teaching and learning, as with any innovation, it can be radical or it can be incremental. And of course, some of the most effective innovations are those that simply work to achieve a useful outcome in a new context. And this is where I want to position my presentation today, in that space of incremental change in relation to teaching and learning activities. So using tools that we're all familiar with, but to help our students to make sense of their thoughts and give structure to their written work. So we know that students gather a lot of learning throughout their time with us, whether it's in activities in class, or whether it's through great innovative efforts that all the tutors and lecturers put in place. But sometimes the most difficult thing is for students to actually work on communicating what they've learned ultimately at the end, to make this all worthwhile for them, to be able to actually demonstrate to those around them what it is they've learned, and to acknowledge the learnings and what they're going to carry through into their careers as they move forward. In my teaching practice, I use a variety of tools to help students to explore possible options for breaking down problems and satisfying clients' needs. So, for example, in the consultancy unit that I talk about at level 6 for our students, I encourage students to engage in brain dumping activities that try to make sense of their client's brief. So that's in order to get them to go through an exhaustive exploration of all the possible issues to be addressed, and to take note of all the ideas that they come up with. And the aim, of course, is to do this without judgment, so to stop them jumping to conclusions and making assumptions around what the client needs and how they're going to solve the problem. So it's to slow them down a little bit, because obviously they want to jump to their preconceived notions or ideas. So we want to get them to brainstorm ideas, to find creative solutions for clients. So we want them to think of all of the ideas, so they're not losing any of that rich detail of those initial gut reactions they had, because we want them to trust what they're putting out there in the room. We want them to trust what their ideas are. We want them to share with each other what the ideas are. So when I start to talk about activities to help our students, I kind of like to go to that micro level. I like to go to that place where we give them a chance to scaffold, to learn from the very basics right up to becoming proficient professionals. So if I look at my sales and marketing unit with students, and again, level 6, well, that's actually level 5, I apologize. So working my sales and marketing students, they use a causal mapping. We use a causal mapping approach to follow threads, linking the macro factors that impact their industry, bringing them right down to those micro issues that are showing up in their business. And by doing this, it helps them to logically follow the data. It shows them how to use the data to recognize what pressures are on the industry and bring them right down to that place of the stakeholders that they hear so much about. Who are these stakeholders? Let's draw the thread right down to understand what it's like to be them, put themselves in their shoes, and be inspired to propose innovative solutions to satisfy their needs. So we use all these different techniques, whether it's in the consultancy unit, whether it's in sales and marketing, or whether indeed it's in the final project module, that unit that we have with our degree apprenticeship students. So just a little bit around thinking and writing. And I'm really becoming interested in, so I'm a student of this right now. I'm getting really interested in how to help our students to make sense of what they're learning and be able to capture it all and communicate it well, so that when they're being assessed, they're making the best of what they know, and they're putting it in such a structure that it makes it really clear to those people who are assessing and marking there and giving them grades for the work that they're working on. So when we talk about visible thinking, Bryson was the author in this book, Visible Thinking. And they talk about unlocking causal mapping for practical results. So it's about using a simple and useful technique for addressing situations where thinking as an individual or as a group matters to the outcome of the solution. So visual mapping in this case helps to make sense of complex problems and identify connections and communicate the learnings to oneself or to others. And this is really important because in many cases, when we ask students to write assignments, they're kind of communicating with themselves, but they're also trying to communicate across to us outside of their writing experience. We're then going to assess the situation. So thinking of their assignments, with the assignments we set for our students, many of us set writing challenges in which we want our students to demonstrate their learning. And we also use writing techniques, such as the ones I spoke about. So brain dumping, writing, post-it notes. Everybody talks about post-it notes, popping them all up. What are all the ideas? Write them all up there. So we use writing techniques in class activities to help them make sense of the content and to embed the learning, to check that it's landed with them. I'm looking at a book I found, which is Charles Baserman, a reference guide to writing across the curriculum. And he reinforces what we aim to do as teachers. He's saying that students' thoughts and understanding can grow and clarify through the process of writing, whether it's through essays, and no surprise, a lot of assignments have traditionally been essays or report writing. We use note-taking for learning and for summarizing. So we use written summarizing techniques. In class, we often use Mentimeter or Padlet for gathering ideas, for getting students to write down everything that's coming to their minds. What do they think? And then we see it up on the screen, written there in the form of notes, so we can actually visualize it. I've been working a lot with a colleague lately, Trevor, who has been working, who works a lot and done a lot of research on cognitive mapping. And he mentioned to me this phrase, which I like, is, how do I know what I think until I see what I say? And in all of these activities, that's really what we're doing, is we're helping students to see what's actually going on in their mind. It also helps us as teachers to understand what are they getting, what message is landing with them. So when we talk about how do I know what I think until I see what I say, a lot of us experience in class students who nod their heads, who agree with us. In discussions, they talk a good talk and they seem to have got everything that we're getting across to them. They seem to have explored and can feed back. But when it comes to writing assignments, we don't always see that coming through 100%. Sometimes I'm surprised because I've had those deep conversations with students and I think they've got it. And we've talked about their ideas, we've talked about their target market, their strategies, etc. But then when they write their assignments, something is missing. They haven't quite been able to translate it from their thoughts to their paper or to their computers. So even though we have our discussions and we go through stuff, it doesn't always come through. So these discussions I've been having on cognitive mapping with Trevor have got me really interested in this whole area. So I say I'm a student because I'm not an expert in, I am learning and I'm using techniques that I find are useful for students. So using writing techniques, I'm trying to help students know what they think when they see what they say. So to help them to get through that point of getting it from their mind to the paper in a way that is useful for communication, shows them in their best light and helps them to demonstrate clearly their learning. So writing does play a part still in making sense of knowledge and also making sense of communication. So what we expect from our students, in all of our units, we expect our students to learn subject content, to engage with theory, apply tools and models to the delivery of an innovative project. We want them to reflect on workplace experiences because many of the students that I'm talking about are apprenticeship students. As I said, they're post-career students and they have so much vast experience of their workplace, so they can reflect on the workplace experience and craft professional documents and critical essays to demonstrate their learnings. Now, our degree apprenticeship business professionals are no different to any other student. They work through a challenging program of management units. And we expect them to take on board all of their learnings. And they are very lucky. They benefit from the application of theory to practice in their own everyday workplace. And the more aware they are of new management theory, etc., they start to integrate their learnings into their workplace and bring it back into the classroom. And through authentic activities, we integrate that learning, the practical learning, with the academic learning. And we strongly encourage this practical engagement as a vehicle for making sense of what they learn. So there's a constant reference to theory and practice, and help them to recognize how important it is to integrate the theory into their assessments, because ultimately we really value the practical learning, but in the end their program is still an academic program, and we are expecting them to deliver assignments that have good practical and academic value. So in that final assessment of the program, the apprentices must demonstrate this management learning through a synoptic business project. And they need to integrate theories and topics from across the program. So not only in their project that they're doing while they're working here, but also across their program. And we do expect a high quality of report, and we want them to integrate all the challenges they faced, etc. So a bit of context for their final assignment. They're working on a project that they have defined and designed. And as they're coming towards the end of the unit that we're with them, they're working on that project in their workplace. It's a real live project, or they've come to the end of it. So they're very close to the doing of that project. So they've defined and designed it prior to the unit we have them, and then they're doing and reviewing that project during the time they're with us. So there's an awful lot going on for them. They're applying new concepts and models, and they're reflecting on their learning. And from this experience of the project, but also across all of the other units that they've covered in this unit as well. So we asked them to write this all up in a business report at the end of their project. And many students struggle to structure their thoughts and communicate clearly. And it's about us getting this balance right between the practical learning and the integrating theory into the practice of their workplace project, but equally reminding them they've got to be able to communicate this information in an academic piece of work. So in the session when they're working on their doing and reviewing and they're summarizing what's happened, I try to help them with using a cognitive mapping technique, very similar to what we all know about already. So as I say, it's an innovation, but it's incremental, and it's using it in a way that is helping my students to get to a point where they can write clearly and confidently and not go too much into narrative, and be reflective and also professional in how they communicate. So they need to be able to communicate all of the challenges they faced in the rollout of the project, as well as the actions that they've taken to mitigate the challenges. They also need to reflect on the actions, analyze the effectiveness, and identify the learning points across all of the actions they took. So there's an awful lot going on for them. And the cognitive mapping technique, it's effective because it gives them thinking time at this point before they start to write up about their do and review. It's effective because it gives them that time to sort out their approach to writing, time to think, plan, and structure their approach. And it encourages them to identify all of the issues and the problem areas of the project before writing them, before they cluster them into those themes that they can use for writing. So the cognitive mapping approach, I'll just go through it's a three-step approach, helps make sense of their learning, gives them structure for clear communication for these two sections that they're facing to write. And this session can be equally effective online or face-to-face, because a lot of time we do it online, and equally in class. They can work as individuals or in groups. So what we work with is a whole set of post-it notes, which would be a typical cognitive mapping session. And we start off by saying, okay, you can use online MS Whiteboard, pen and paper, post-it notes, Miro, mind A lot of them are familiar with Miro, with MindMap, with MS Whiteboard, through working on other units. So they're familiar with these different apps or different software for gathering their thoughts and issues. So that we give them the opportunity to use whichever they want. So step one, we warm them up, because you can't just throw them in and say, start writing. It's like we warm them up with an interactive Q&A session to loosen up the challenges that they all face, so they get their juices flowing, and to clarify the expectation of the activity. So we're saying, we want you to call out all the main issues that have challenged you during your project. Can you name those issues? What has challenged you, challenged the smooth progress of the project? What happened? What caused the problem? Who caused the problem? And in this case, we get them sharing a few examples. So they're calling out what's happened for them. And and it just gets them warmed up to start thinking, because otherwise we may leave some people behind who aren't really sure of what to expect of this activity. And we know that there's always a broad range of individuals in the class. Some get it immediately and they're on it. Others are sit back and wait to hear what anybody else says. So that once I feel that they're all happy to move forward, I kind of set them a timeline. I say, take 8 minutes, 55 seconds, write down as many issues as you can think of, and what's challenged your project, what's caused the difficulty for you. And in this case, I would say individually, free flow, mind dump style, write down all the issues that came up without judgment or without sanitizing your notes, because a lot of times this is where students take time to overthink it. It's the same at the beginning of a project when we work with consultancy students. They're already working on the solution. So I'm trying to get them, come back, don't go diving into solutions, don't go diving into the perfect judgment around the categories.
Hi, Caroline. Sorry to interrupt. We're just running for time, I think. So
that's cool. Thank you. I'm almost there. So what are the main issues challenging your project? Write them down as many as you can, and whatever comes to mind, they head for they write out all of their issues. And then finally they group these things. So part 3 is group your issues and put them into categories. And a lot of the key areas that come up, they start recognizing when they've written down all their details that yes, something is around communication, something's around the risk assessment, stakeholder management, etc. But it gives them the opportunity to find at least 3 or 4 key headers that they can use to structure their do and review themes or subheaders for their report.
Caroline,
and
I think that's great, and I think we can see also the student quotes. Maybe let's pick up the final bit as part of the Q&A. I just want to make sure that we also have enough time.
Perfect.
But thank you so much. I think that was really interesting. I particularly liked how you talked about making thinking visible. I think that's something I'm sure that we can all relate to, and that sounds like a really practical exercise. So thank you so much. And I'm handing over the screen to Steve, who's going to talk about localization. Steve, over to you.
Katerina, John, thank you for organizing this. Tony, Caroline, it's an honor to be presenting with you. And to the ISPIM family, it's been a warm community for me for more than 10 years, and I'm happy to be here. I'm going to share my screen right now. One of the many things we do as educators, I would argue, is to demystify a lot of the assumptions around the topics we talk about. No doubt there are common myths around entrepreneurship, innovation, maybe even teaching. And it's not just for us or our community, but deeply embedded in our students. And in my context, I face, I don't know if they're unique challenges, but significant challenges around understanding what innovation is, what creativity is, what entrepreneurship is. So for the example that I'm giving about innovative teaching, I feel this is something that's actionable across all programs. It does take a little bit of time, but helps to understand and allow the students to place innovation in relation to themselves, in relation to the program or degree, and then maybe to the wider community. So for instance, my program at the University of South Florida is an undergraduate entrepreneurship and innovation program. Historically, this program has focused strictly on entrepreneurship and the traditional single entrepreneur starting a business. We have widened the mission to include innovation and career paths within innovation. As you guys know, there are a range of career paths. In addition to that, I was expected to bring that innovation piece to the program. My program is, at the time I started, was relatively small, meaning about 12 to 20 majors. Now we've been able to grow to about 100, etc. I work at a large institution, maybe top 10 in the US. We have about 60,000 students. We have 3 campuses that are 3-4 hours away. And I'm expected to communicate in many different modalities to them, hybrid, online, in person. And one thing that has been constant feedback, both in the community and with the students, is that these concepts that we regularly teach in innovation and provide cases around are these wonderful examples of how companies such as Silicon Valley and Apple, Amazon, you name these companies and case studies, are innovating. But they seem so far away from at least where I am in the peninsula of a peninsula in the United States, where historically there hasn't been big business. However, we have world-changing innovations that have happened within, we'll say, a 10-block radius. And to help my students realize that they are innovative, that the region is innovative, and it's not just from far away distant land, but they're part of a bigger story, a bigger narrative, a bigger standing on the shoulders of giants. How can we reframe that narrative? And that means contextualizing it and localizing it. It's not something we do well in our region, but I've learned from other places that have a wonderful narrative and history of innovation, and I could take from that to help understand it here, meaning this. There are wonderful examples of innovation that the students can relate from their point of view, or whoever the trainee's point of view, that are deeply local to wherever you are. These examples take the challenge of understanding innovation that happens far away and remote from my personal experience and places it to some place that I can actually see, touch, and walk to. While my online students might see the cases and the stories that I tell through the narratives of, for instance, Wikipedia was founded in my city. Every student knows Wikipedia. It's one of the most famous websites out there. No one knows locally that Wikipedia was first founded here. This talks about democratization, digital literacy, maybe what truth is or how we define truth, crowdsourcing, wisdom of crowds, collective intelligence. You get the topics that may relate to an innovation course and introduce. When I introduce this to my students, they start, this one and the next examples, they start seeing these concepts as deeply embedded in our community and something that's attainable and reachable. In addition to that, my students are not just, so they can be sophomores, juniors, and seniors. I don't know how that maps directly to the UK model of education. And I may be teaching students who are in art design, business, history, psychology. So they have a wide range of experiences. And regardless of what they are, they know Wikipedia. They can understand the concept of maybe wisdom of crowds or democratization of innovation a lot better because this is a perfect example. And I know for a fact, and I would argue, it may take effort and research depending where you are, or it may not. But you have examples of all these topics directly related to you, and we can walk to the location where Wikipedia is found. We do the same for the first commercial air flight that happened 300 yards from our campus. This is a perfect example of innovation in engineering, navigation, design, aviation, etc. And we have a big statue on our pier. My town is kind of like Brighton or Hove. And imagine walking from our campus to the new pier that we just built, which is a form of innovation, but seeing this, and I can't remember the name of the plane that flew from our town to the next town, which is where we have another campus, and we have this beautiful statue, and we talk about the different inputs and these outcomes that have happened as a result of the first commercial air flight. Now that's both product, that's service, that's business model, that was different, industry, you get the idea. Now the students are touching and living that part and walking that with the students who take the in-person classes. We have a history museum that we visited before. We have a famous historian who's able to connect a lot more of the dots than I know locally. And we can start seeing how we're co-creating, telling the local story, and placing the students in the context of the shoulders of giants that have walked before us. The last example that I use, again, these are all supported within modules because remember, I'm teaching primarily online with some face-to-face on a hybrid model. So I'm trying to mash up these types of learning environments. We have a thing called historically Doc Web City. I argue this is retail innovation and an early primer for Amazon Prime and even social innovation in my country at a time when businesses were not hiring people of color or in the African American community in my city. This business was. So we start reaching different topics around innovation and starting to frame the concept of innovation and bringing it directly home to how we have changed the world or at least the region and the nation. What other examples? So I start to feel that we're moving away from these distant concepts to more personalized and relatable concepts that we can touch, feel, and see in a historical perspective in innovation. And again, this is just kind of like an entry-level course, so we're just trying to get ourselves grounded and familiar with the concepts. So they're kind of primers or tapas or ways to get students more interested. So this course started when I took over a program that needed regeneration. At 18 students, we now have 180 students because people are interested in the topic. It's relatable. They can see it across their disciplines, topics. And I would say we're moving to more of a narrative, not just a student-centered approach, but a narrative base that they can see themselves. Because part of the homework, which I haven't overly touched on, is taking these experiences and the concepts, creating what I call a creative, because the class is creativity innovation, a creative asset. And the asset is what I frame is no longer an assignment, but content creation. And most of the students are familiar with content creation because they're doing it on social media already. And create a 5-minute video of you answering certain prompts that I give them around the topics and themes, but use this as a time to not just create a video of a talking head, but a creative asset that you can use as a portfolio that demonstrates your skill. And remember, my students are from all across the university. So they repeat this and they post it in what I would frame as a pseudo or semi-public form, meaning it's a discussion post of the video. And then there's a second phase where each student has to watch someone else's student and create a new shorter video, repeating what they learned, super kind of pedagogically, where they're repeating the same concepts that they learned, and now they're creating a new creative asset in response to that. So in summary, I would argue that these are ways of localizing. And we have another one around a neighborhood, which is called Ybor City. It's known as Cigar City. It basically set the economic prosperity for our region for 100 years because we were the city that aristocrats, kings, nobles, dictators were smoking. And it said Tampa on the label. So that's how we became famous and changed the world when Winston Churchill is smoking a Tampa cigar, deciding the fate of the world through World War II, smoking this. We had an impact, plus diversity of Cubans, Italians, Jews, Puerto Ricans coming together with their own skills to create economic prosperity I'm in Florida. It literally is a swamp that probably should never have been built on. but we have economic prosperity. So there's forms of reflection in learning, localization of these concepts, kind of a hands-on approach, pseudo throwback to field trips. I call them field trips. But in short, this is a simple learning tool that has been very effective because students have grown and taken this class. They give great feedback. And then they want to learn more of a deeper dive of my next course. So that course has grown from 4 to 32, which is a capstone course. And I want to give time for the rest of the talk. But in short, localization has been powerful for the region, here for my program, growth, understanding, and learning. I'm going to stop sharing. Back to you, Katarina. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You can see there's a bit of a virtual applause happening. Great examples. And I think when we speak about bringing innovation to life, that was really an excellent showcase. I'm inviting now all speakers to unmute themselves so it can be an easier conversation. We have received a number of questions. I will start first maybe with some questions that go to particular individuals, and then we might have some questions that are to all speakers together. Starting with a question from Andrew, which is to you, Tony. I'm sure you've put up with the chat. Can you modify the pivot so that it is based on feedback, not just a random change? Listening to feedback, interpreting is a real skill.
I think that's a great idea, Andrew. We've discussed this several times. The reason we haven't done it is really complexity, that each project is so different. The challenges are different, each project's so different. And we've just kept it as simply as the sponsor has decided, they've just changed their mind. They don't want you to do that. They want to focus on this different idea. But I totally get where you're coming from. If we could do that, and we had time and more resource.
We could talk about it offline because, you know, but I mean, what we do is, first of all, we don't like sponsor ideas. We like the students to come up with idea. We think coming up with the idea is the creative part of creative problem solving. So that's another issue.
So they have the challenge, but they create the idea. So they have quite a wide-ranging challenge, and they can go.
Okay, that's fine. All right,
whichever direction they want.
So I think we do something similar, but I think what we're trying to teach them is how to react to negative feedback. Like that won't work, or someone's already doing it, or whatever. And how do they react to that? And by the way, sometimes they should stop, and sometimes they should pivot, and sometimes they should just keep going. And it's learning about that. It's in the words of Kenny Rogers, know when to hold, know when to fold, know when to walk away, know when to run. So.
And actually, we do talk about that. We say that because before we introduce the changes happening, we say sometimes changes happen. There are things you can do. Sometimes you can challenge them, and ... Sometimes you have no choice. And then we say, and now we've got a bit of news for you. And we say, this one you've got no choice. So it's about how you turn it from a problem into an opportunity. But absolutely, I totally get the idea of why it would be great to pivot. It's just we've made a conscious decision that it's just going to be too much. Sounds bad. Hard work for us.
Fair enough. We are really discussing very actionable and practical aspects here as well. I guess my next question goes to Caroline. You talked about sticky notes, but also mentioned virtual boards that students are using. So what is the role of physical resources compared to virtual ones in making thinking visible? And what is maybe the preference of students and the impact based on your experience?
Based on my experience, I actually think they all like going back to Post-it notes. So it's there are lots of, and the thing is, there's lots of there's always a few people in the group that are much more comfortable using technical. Like you can use the whiteboard on we use Teams, of course, MS Teams for our online classes and stuff. So the whiteboard's great. There's, as I said, there's loads of other. They use Miro in strategy, and I think in project management unit as well. So they're all familiar with those, but many of them prefer to sit there and literally write lists or work with Post-it notes. It helps them just to get everything out of their heads down onto paper. Then they can work with others that way too, because it's a lot easier if you're at a table in a class situation, to help each other to put those into categories, because they kind of share and they'll look through and they'll go, well, that's surely that's a communication issue if that's going on, and they may not have looked on it as a communication issue or a stakeholder management issue, or they may not have looked at that. So it's nice to have it on the table, because then they can all see it and they can help each other out, and so we get a lot more collaborative learning, which is really good.
Right.
So,
Bill is asking, Steve, what is a narrative phase?
Great question, Bill. I would suggest, and I don't know if this is part of pedagogy, but what I see happening and some benefits from is moving away from, or trying to, we see the role of story of being important. And I'm trying to shift the narrative from companies or even the dependence on technology, but reframing the learning as an innovator's journey, which I believe there's a lot of evidence for. And once we place the student as the innovator through the text that we're providing, through the homework and assignments that we're providing, and once they have this mindset and they view themselves in this, you know, I don't play video games, but I think it's RPG, role-playing games, or seeing themselves as the innovator, where they are part of themselves, part of a team, and part of something bigger. And the trials and tribulations that all innovators and entrepreneurs and creatives face internally, externally to a firm or in the process, once they begin to move and see themselves with that, they see themselves as more capable and comfortable with applying the tools, opposed to pretend you are a CEO of a $10 billion company and you have to make a decision of X, Y, and Z. I'm not sure that's relatable, but if you put them and you meet them where they're at, I don't know if it's really narrative-based or student-centric, but some other tools that I use, I try to move away from some of the language that's framed on a lot of the content that's out there and the dependency on technology, to move it to a personal level that allows them to navigate these complex concepts in ways that relate deeply to them. Mm-hmm. So for me, I would argue narrative-based approach to, I don't know about learning or pedagogy. That's how I framed it. Don't know if that's the best word, but that's what I'm trying to do.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Steve. In terms of, yeah, you brought it alive beyond the heading, and I think, yeah, that giving them agency is a really good idea. So I really like your angle. Thank you.
I think one point we also shouldn't forget is probably the investment of time and effort in some of these activities. And I can only imagine, Tony and Steve, what it might take in terms of preparing. So the very practical one is, how do you balance the kind of commitment, and what is the preparation as part of, for example, the industry challenge, or for example, the visits on site? Maybe this question predominantly to you, Tony and Steve.
Sure. I think the scaling challenge is a very significant one. So as part of our scaling now, we've actually got a bit of workload to work out how can we increase the number of students we can support without losing the magic of what we've got, because it is quite resource intensive at the moment. So, for example, with the challenges, we have the same challenge for multiple teams. So at the moment, we have 2 teams have the same challenge, and at certain times they present to each other. So we sort of make use of that. We're thinking as we go up to more challenges, then, or more students, more classes, we'll probably have more teams with the same challenge. So that's one way to do it. What we don't want to lose is the magic of having time with each team. So we have about 7 or 8 students in each team, 10 students in a class. So currently we have 2 classes for the main module. We're looking to keep that model and go to more classes. So it's then, how do we simplify it? So we're looking to change our assessment a little bit. So that's basically a reflective assignment paper to cut that down a little bit, but without losing the focus on the learning outcomes. So there's various things we're going through. We haven't got all the answers yet, Bill, but I see you raising the question in the chat. But that's definitely something we're looking at, because it is quite resource intensive. But I think everybody at the university and the students see the benefit of it. So in the way we're going to scale it up, we're going to try and do it in a way that doesn't lose, as I say, the magic, some of the good things. But that's definitely, we're looking to simplify certain things.
Right. I think that's really important, especially now that a lot of our programs are becoming larger and larger. And I'm sure people like Bill are probably listening very attentively with very large cohorts to manage.
The other thing I would just add to that is we've sort of been developing a small teaching team who could all lead one of the classes. So I started with being able to lead. Now 3 of us can lead. So we're sort of expanding our team, if you like, and using the experience of either people. I've got industry experience. One of them's got more deep sort of university research experience. One's got a lot of different teaching experience. So trying to bring all those skills together, learning from each other, and then expanding our team. So this semester I'm with a relatively young new member of staff. She's been fantastic, and then she'll become one of the members of the teaching team. So it's about expanding our capability as well.
Yeah, great. And Steve, how's that for you in terms of preparing for your module?
Great question. I'm honored, Tony, that you're doing that, and Caroline, what you're working on, great tools for me to take away. I've done some things similar to what Tony has done, and I've faced significant challenge, particularly time and effort. For me, it depends on how developed your brief needs to be in your problem, but it could take me 40 hours before the even semester starts. And then depending the size of the class, which I've had 80, and if you break that up into groups, that's a lot of groups and a lot of time. And frankly, you have trade-offs. I mean, you have to have a life, or maybe you don't. I don't know. So those have been some challenges with me, and then alignment with industry, who constantly want to extract value, but I'm not sure always give enough value back. So these are some of the challenges I've had working with industry. So you have to be very selective. As far as what I presented, it took me a while. I'm not from the region to learn these types of things. And some of it had to do with just, spending time here. So if these weren't common examples being told to me when I arrived, I'm pretty sure students don't know them. Other new people that are arriving don't know them as well. So for me, mine is, I'm always looking for different angles to connect the dots at the different events that I go to. So this took me just time over knowing the region and becoming more comfortable here. But I do think you could, with the tools that we have right now, you could research this, I would assume, in 4 hours maybe, that you can come up with some decent examples. Of course, if you wanted to build content to support those, that may take more time depending what you want to do. But I'm pretty sure you can localize these through your network, or make an open call, or can we have some good examples? So I think a good starting point is a low barrier to entry. That's what I feel.
And Caroline, a reflective question from Bill. What have you learned working with industry apprenticeship learners that you can bring to traditional students aged 18 to 25? And maybe what kind of differences, if there are any, have you observed?
So you're saying what have I learned from the industry students that I can bring to the, okay. There's interesting challenges with both. You find that the degree apprenticeship students have a lot of practical experience, but they also have high anxiety levels because they've not been in education for a long time. So it's a very interesting challenge for them to find themselves back in a classroom situation, even if it is group work or whatever. So in many ways, it's getting them to recognize what skills they have and where the gaps are in their knowledge, and try to also be very authentic in the activities that we engage them in. And I think the learning from that is with the younger students, because they're all on the same level really in reality, is to get them to engage with the world around them and start recognizing, learning, and finding out more about the industries that they're interested in, so that they can actually have a virtual integrated experience. But we're asking them to go out there and check out what's going on. They're great at doing research. They're great at, when they're interested, in zooming around on their phones and finding out lots of data. So we try to get them to actually find those examples and work with those examples of from their industries that they're keen on. But the learnings across are, the younger student has a set of anxieties and uncertainties around what they're doing. The older group has, but they're always in different situations. So it's, yeah, what am I bringing? I don't want from one to the other is that understanding of how important it is to really get into an industry that you're keen on and to explore and find out about it, because it gives you a whole source of lots of information to work with when you're looking for case studies or ideas, etc. And the other thing is to remind us all that we all have to learn. You got a scaffold. We're all we all have come into the class with something, and we're all there to learn. Nobody has it all sussed. And I think a lot of our students feel that, whether they're older or younger, they all think that, oh, somebody else has got it so much better. So it's, yeah, trying to get them all to recognize what skills and strengths they have and to be proud of them, and then recognize where the skills gaps lie and work on them too. So I'll stop it there.
That's a great introduction. David from MMU actually shared with us in the chat a question which I am wondering if he wants to elaborate on. It's about if you had any ideas on how to develop these type of competencies beyond individual units. Who is this question directed to? David, do you want to come in? I don't know if he is still with us.
Where is the question? Let me see. David works with me.
Yeah, he said if you had any ideas on how to develop these type of competencies beyond individual units. I'm not sure which presentation this was linked to. It might have been linked to Steve, as that was around the time he was sharing his.
Hi, it's David here. You well? Thanks, everyone. Yeah, it was kind of a general question for all, really. It was, I think Tony sort of answered it in a way with regards to that kind of scaling up. I think my idea is all of these things are great strategies and approaches that you can take kind of at a unit level. But I guess I'm kind of curious if anyone's had any success of kind of spreading the word a little bit further across perhaps departments or across programs where you can have a bit of more of a united approach to develop, kind of competencies to, sort of encompass innovation, creativity, just to kind of get the message from a wider audience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, let me actually add to your question, because I think it's a really fantastic one, which would be my final question to all of you, is in terms of, first of all, what inspires you? How do you stay up to date with the latest educational tools? Where do you find your inspiration, the methods that you're adopting? And also, if you have any suggestion for colleagues who may be a little bit more traditional in their teaching approach, but want to be a bit more creative and innovative, what would you be recommending to them? So I guess a bit of a package of questions here, but how do you disseminate all the great work you're doing more widely?
So if I maybe I could chip in with something we're actively doing at the University of Leeds at the moment. So we've there's quite a lot of interest in design thinking, which many of you know is a number of different sort of creativity and other techniques about human-centered design and problem-centered design, which you can use for lots of things. I used it at IBM in industry and so on. I teach my students how to use it for the innovation modules. But we've created a community of practice in the university now to try and bring this across different faculties, people interested in the topic, getting together every fortnight. We share stories. We've started having a few face-to-face events and things like this. We're lucky the Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Student Education is bought into the concept. He's looking to do some of his change programs to use design thinking and so on. So that's one way, David. If there's an item or an area that people are interested in, you can do it as a sort of, we've started this as a bottom-up community, and now we're sort of meeting strategic demand and interest, if you like. So we're meeting with the Deputy Vice Chancellor next week to talk about how we can take it to the next level and scale it and get more people involved and get some formal support for it, because we're all doing it in a goodwill at the moment. So that's one thing you can do.
Right.
Katharina, to your question, let's bring it back a bit to ISPIM. Our colleagues, we've got some colleagues in one of the ISPIM special interest groups, John will probably remember, who are doing some fantastic work around innovation competencies. And I think that research, going back to David's question about what are the themes, being able to articulate that as something that brings multi-courses, multi-modules together, so we can emphasize those competencies in different ways, will be really helpful. John, is Karen and what's that group called?
John had to leave, I believe. I'm not sure he's back.
Okay, fine. So let's share that or whatever, but there's some great work going on there, which I think will be very easy to deploy.
Sounds interesting. I just was going to add from MMU, we have from the very early years, like from our level 4s, we have an employability unit that we integrate completely into our curriculum. So we have from level 4s up to level 6s. We introduce the strengths profile, Capfinity strengths profiling. And so all students start from a very early point to kind of recognize or become more aware of their skill set and start to focus on. Again, we have a lot of business integration, so we have a lot of business activities where external businesses are coming into the university and starting to talk about skills and competencies that are required within different industries. And we help the whole idea is to get students aware of, well, what's required if I'm interested in this industry, what's required if I'm interested in this industry, and what's required if I'm interested in working anywhere, and what do I have at the moment, and a broader range of strengths. As opposed to traditionally, I mean, way back, I used to talk to my students about having, well, what are your Olympic spikes? What are your 3 key strengths that you've got? And can you start telling people about them? Strengths profile does this broad range, which I love, because it makes you realize that we all have unrealized strengths as well, that we're capable and competent, but we just need some more practice in those areas. So where are those areas? How do we find them? And we try to find opportunities for students to develop those skills and strengths within units, but also study skills separately, bringing other industry reps into the university. So kind of a combination. And then we have an entrepreneurship group within, I've suddenly lost the wording, but we have the incubator attached, like a business incubator attached to our university. So students can get involved there as well. So it's a kind of an integration of all things, but strengths profile from a very early does really get them thinking and give them a chance to recognize there's lots more strengths than just those things they've always been told they're good at.
Since you're talking about skills, I think that's a wonderful way to just quickly bring in Tony before I ask the same question to Steve, to maybe come back to the question how you measure skills development. Caroline mentioned Capfinity, but how about your experience in that area?
Yeah, interesting. I was just replying to Andrew to say if we didn't answer his message, and same for Bridget, if we didn't answer your messages in the chat, I'll follow up on LinkedIn. But that's a really interesting one. We don't do a formal assessment or anything like that. We use reflective essay. So we ask the students to write about the specific skill areas, and then we use the Gibbs reflective cycle, which is, what happened, how do you feel about that, what did you learn, and then particularly what might you do differently in future based upon that learning. So it's much more of a reflective approach rather than saying, you rated yourself as 3 out of 10 for communication skills, and now you're 7 out of 10. It's much more of what did you practically learn, and from that, what can you do differently next time, and particularly how might you apply it. So sometimes it's in a job application, or it might be in a future what they would do differently in a future project, for example.
excellent. Steve, coming back to the original question around how do you disseminate your practice? Where do you find your inspiration? And what do you do to inspire colleagues, I guess, around you to maybe move beyond the traditional teaching approach?
These are great questions. We at my university have a robust, what we frame as Center for Teaching and Learning. So there's constant workshops that I can be both a member of, a listener, or whatever. So that's certainly one. And that's both on the university level, campus level, business school level. You get the idea. So that's one way to certainly to scale the teaching if I have time to participate. But more importantly, I think for me, what inspires me, and I think it deeply ties back to that localization or even personalization, is the inspiration is from our students. The examples that I have, which I haven't given yet, but the work that the students have done and created their own career paths, have, you know, invented a life and desires that you can never read about in textbooks. Make sure that you're documenting that, invite them back, have them share with the students, create their own video that you can embed in your own module. So when the student watches that video of one who is an entrepreneurship and sustainability major, but also has a skill set and passion for music, takes these topics, applies them to her music career, launches them, merch, videos, songs, you get the idea, festivals, and puts that in a video to say, hey, students, 3 years ago, I was sitting in your chair, and if I can do it, you can do it. And I'm using the same skills you're learning in this class. So those are things that inspire me. The students taking their journey, making it relatable, digestible in the formats that our current students demand, and letting them experience and engage with those innovators who are leaving a path and of of breadcrumbs for others to follow.
Well, these are excellent recommendations. I can see you get a thumbs up already. So I'm not going to try to build on that because that was absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed this conversation. What I will do is just steal a few minutes to say a few final words about our ISPIM annual conference to highlight the continuation of the conversation, because we are having a couple of workshops planned as part of our special interest group. We talk about who are we teaching and reflect a little bit on the audience and also what that means in terms of implications for our teaching. We have another workshop planned at the annual conference, and I'm not going to pitch it because we have Bill here. Bill, do you want to say a few words?
Well, this is the different content areas. How do we connect the what with the who that Benoit will be exploring? So the idea is we're going to have a day when we work through a sequence of 1 hour sessions, building, you know, you can come into one of the sessions or you can join the dots that way. What are the what's similar and what's different about doing this at UG, undergrad, postgrad, and practitioner courses? A lot of what's come through today. And we've got different perspectives, and we're also tying this back to the ISO innovation standard, because we now know so much about this. We've got an ISO standard, but hey, that standard doesn't apply to everybody in the same way. How do we make those connections? Back to you, Katerina.
Yeah, excellent. And we have three more actually. Where should we be learning? There's a workshop that is led by Karina and colleagues to think about where should we be learning, discovering and framing a challenge around a human need. So there will be some hands-on activities involved, And then we have a workshop on generative AI in context of innovation management, education, where I'm involved again, hands-on activities. So we think about the different tools, we do some practical exercises and think about trends, strategies, and how we can incorporate Gen AI into teaching and learning. And finally, we replicate something very similar to what we've done today in person. So hopefully if you're attending ISPIM 2024, that's another way to continue the conversation, thinking about how should we be teaching, what are the resources, how can we make it engaging, interactive, innovative. And if you feel that you have something that you'd like to share as part of that session, you can sign up using the QR code or the link. So that was a quick whistle-stop tour, but I want to finish today's online event by saying a big, big thank you to Tony, Caroline, and Steve, who've done an excellent job in demonstrating some of the teaching practices that they're engaged with. For me, clearly very inspirational. I've taken away a lot. I hope you enjoyed it too, and I hope to see you next time.